What's happening, everybody? Welcome to this Tuesday edition of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I am your host, Dan Bespris. I'm at Dan Bespris on social media, and the network is at Old Man Squad on social media, which I will once again reiterate is not a reference to the people hosting shows on the network, though I may be decidedly old and grumpy. It is about the way I draft my fantasy team. So, if you're interested in being a part of the Old Man Squad network, hit me up. You can be young. You don't have to be a man. You don't have to be related to being an old man in any way, shape, or form. All you want to do, if you want to be a part of the network, is have an interest, a passion for broadcasting, whatever that might be. Sports, not sports. We could talk or not talk for hours. Hit me up at Dan Vespris. That's really the only way to get a hold of me right now. we don't have a website for this thing. We're just a collective. Today, we're talking to my good buddy, Matt Smith. Smitty is on the show in just a minute or two here. We recorded an interview last night in between his son going down for a nap and my children going down for bedtime because, Los Angeles to Australia, slight time difference. And we managed to wedge in a really good discussion on his favorites from free agency, his ideas on team building on the head-to-head side. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Again, that's coming up with Matt Smith in just a matter of moments. Quickly do take a moment at the front end of the show to like, rate, and subscribe. We continue to get more likes. We continue to get more subscribers. We haven't had a rating in a little bit. So, if you're out there and you're like, man, I really should do my part, this would be that moment. And also, fantasy news-wise, a couple of very small tidbits that broke over the last 24 hours. One of them, Cameron Payne signed a one-year deal with the Knicks, $3.1 million on that deal for Payne. He will, and this is basically verbatim what I tweeted, he'll have one game this year where like Brunson and sick or one of them is hurt and the other one gets fouls, and Campaign will have 15 points and 7 assists, and then I'll have 15 people in my mentions being like, should I pick up Campaign? And then I'll have to remind you all that the answer to that is, as always, a resounding no. Also, news over the last 24 hours, Seth Curry apparently about to sign a one-year deal with the Hornets. I don't think his body can really hold up to the rigors of an NBA season, but if there's any place where he might be able to see the floor, it's on an extraordinarily bad Hornets team. I'm sure they'd rather develop some youngsters, so I wouldn't go into the season looking to draft either of the two players that we talked about this morning, but keep one eye on Curry in particular, because if the Hornets are finally just like, look, we got to get like a floor spacing veteran out there, then, maybe he has a week or two in the middle of the season, but that would be about it. You came for Smitty, and Smitty you shall have. With Basketball Monsters, Matt Smith begins now. We got Smitty, ladies and gentlemen. Smitty's back. He is the record. You're the pace car, man. First of all, hi. I should probably do that before I get into anything else. He is Matt Smith. He is at S-Man Sports. He is someone that, if you guys have been listening to my show over the years, you've heard his voice quite a few times. He, of course, is an analyst over at basketballmonster.com. And the reason I called him a pacer is every time you jump on one of my shows, whatever it might be, it seems like you set new listenership marks. I don't know how you do it, man. What do you call the groupies that only listen when you're on?
I can't answer that one, mate. I'm not too sure.
We'll come up with a name for him. There's got to be some sort of Matt Smith fan club going on there. So free agency, let's just jump straight in. Everybody seemingly, there's some areas where the general consensus does kind of overlap, but I've heard a lot of different takes on what the fantasy fallout was from a week and a half ago. So let's start on the good side. What was one or a few of your favorite free agency tidbits and how we're going to exploit that come fantasy season?
I think my favourite move, in taking my Australian bias aside, was the move by Josh Giddey from the Thunder to the Chicago Bulls. I mean, he had a down season last year, with this year, last season, finished outside the top 110 on a per game 8 category rank. And we knew that if he was going to stay in OKC, that he was going to come off the bench next season, and that would have really significantly damaged his value again. But going to the Bulls, I think it's the perfect situation. He's going to have the ball in his hands. He's got all the playing time he needs at point guard. He's still got some scorers around him in Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic as well at this current stage, unless anything else happens. But the Bulls, wanted him and apparently believe in him. And if he can get back to, something like 15 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. His field goal percentage has always been pretty good for a point guard. His free throw percentage went up to 80% last season. I know it was on low volume, but that's still pretty good numbers. And if you can get him, in the sort of the mid to late rounds, and you miss out on assists, in the top 50, he's going to be sitting there staring you in the face, and he's probably going to be the best assist option left on the board. And I think he's going to have a nice bounce back season, and could represent some value.
Do you think he gets back to something? It sounded like the numbers you threw out there were relatively close to what he did, not this most recent season, but the previous one in OKC, when he was more of a seemingly foundational building block for them, and then kind of got pushed out a bit this most recent season. That was 16.5, 8, and 6.
Yes.
You take that, and if you ratchet the free throw number up to what you were talking about, that's not bad at all. Do you think that's attainable?
Yeah, I think so. And he averaged, only a 3 a game and just under a steal per game. And again, that season you're referencing, he was 71st in 8 cap value. And that was with the free throw at 73%. So you bump that up to, high 70s or the 80 mark. And, that potentially represents a top 60, top 70 season. And there might be a little bit of meat on the bone left on draft day. And so, I think he's one of the biggest free agency winners from the past couple of weeks.
Do you think anybody else in Chicago is traded before the season starts? I know that contract on LaVine is insane, but they got to get rid of him, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not at this stage. I mean, they re-signed or gave an extension to Patrick Williams. Obviously, got Matas Buzelis in the draft, and the other sort of sleeper and free agency winner I like is Jalen Smith there as well, who played behind Nikola Vucevic. And, we saw what Andre Drummond could do in limited minutes last season. And Jalen Smith, we know he doesn't need a ton of playing time. 20 to 25 minutes for him is enough to put up some value. So I think going into the season, he's probably going to be a deeper league guy. But if Vucevic does get injured, then Jalen Smith definitely comes into standard league relevancy.
Can I ask you a question that's a little bit more philosophical about how to break down the Bulls? Is that all right?
Sure.
So, and this is something that I don't want to say grapple with, but I think it's actually kind of a fun element of what we do when we're staring at these names and these teams and all that stuff. So you're looking at the Bulls right now, and you're seeing Giddey, and you're seeing Kobe White and Vooch, and for the moment, LaVine, and you mentioned Patrick Williams. How do you either mentally, whether it's on a paper or on a Google sheet or just sort of like putting the pieces together, how do you work your way through the guys in that mix that you feel are not even necessarily going to have a good season, but isn't what we're trying to do kind of at the end of it all also isolate the guys that are going to be undervalued going into the draft? So how does that process work for you?
I think it's just combining obviously a player's role and what they're going to do on that team, and then comparing that to projections in the draft board and where you think you can target them. So Kobe White had a huge breakout season last year, and I think it would be a little bit unrealistic to expect him to make a big improvement again. There could be some small improvements, but he's not going to make a big improvement. Zach LaVine's not going to improve. Nikola Vucevic, we wouldn't think is going to have a better season. So, is it Patrick Williams who's coming through, and Josh Giddey, who they traded for, and these two players are probably going to be, and maybe with Kobe White, going to be the cornerstone of of sort of the rebuild, so to speak, now that DeMar DeRozan's not there, and Matters Buzelis in that sort of small forward, power forward position as well, coming in behind. So I think it's just, yeah, like I said, marrying up the role, the projections, the fit on your team, the draft board, and again, it's all about drafting for value. So yeah, we'll see how it all sort of plays out over the next few months and into training camp and post Olympics. And yeah, there's still a bit to go win this off season.
No, I love it. Who's another winner? Him or a loser? Actually, I'll go either way. Where do you want to head next?
Just a couple of quick winners. I also like Trae
Sure.
Young in Atlanta. I think with DeJounte Murray moving out, Trae will have the ball back in his hands a lot more than he did, and potentially 30-point, 10 assist season coming up. And Dan, I'm not sure if you've thought about the first round too much, but after the four, Wemby, Jokic, Luka, and SGA, it gets pretty rough after there.
No, without question.
So I think Trae Young is a guy who potentially was probably going to be sort of an early second round pick, but I think he does come into first round calculations now in the back of that first round, because you're going to get the elite points, the elite assists, the elite threes, and the elite free throw percentage. So 4 really good categories to build upon there, especially in head-to-head leagues. So I like him, and I also like James Harden. With Paul George no longer there, the injury and durability questions that still surround Kawhi Leonard. So yeah, probably wouldn't have James Harden in maybe the top 10 or 15 just yet, but potentially in the mid to late second rounds if people are drafting early. I like James Harden for a little bit of a bounce back season as well.
Did you just give me 2 of the 3 guys in the NBA that are probably going to average a point assist double this year?
Pretty much. I love my point guards. Love my point guards.
Yeah, the other one probably Halliburton, right?
Yeah, well, Tyrese is again his first round point guard. Had the dip in the scoring and really dropped off after All-Star break, whether that was to do with the arrival of Pascal Siakam as well. But yeah, and being around the Olympic team and all the stars that the USA have got, I think that will really help him develop his game. And yeah, expecting Tyrese Halliburton to have a massive season as well.
Do you tend to target? You mentioned that you love your point guards. Do you tend to lean into more guard heavy on your builds?
I try to, yeah, especially early on. I think like we discussed in the podcast maybe a month or so ago that, if you want elite assists, you have to draft them early and inside the first 2 or 3 rounds, because after that they dry up pretty quickly. So I think last year as well, I took sort of 2 or 3 point guards early on, and then you could get some big men later in sort of that 50 to 100 range, and that's probably going to be a similar sort of factor again this year. I haven't looked at it too closely at the moment, but getting those elite point guards with the scoring and the efficiency and the assists and steals and threes as well. It just I think it just gives your team a really nice start. And the bigs with the rebounds and blocks, you can generally find them sort of later on in drafts, and they're a little bit easier to find off the waiver wire than point guards are.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because if anybody missed that episode, what Matt brought up was I guess there were a few elements to it, but it was a discussion on whether or not to attack an elite shot blocker early, because it's a category that can turn so hard. Jaren Jackson Jr. being a good example of that, and also available in those middle rounds. Has anything changed in your approach on generally waiting on blocks this coming year?
Not yet. And like I said, I haven't sort of dug too deep into it yet. I'll sort of get into my drafting tiers over the next probably few weeks, but I still think those names are going to be there, whether it's a Nick Claxton or a Jakob Poeltl, Brook Lopez again, Miles Turner, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, those sort of names. Jalen Johnson's probably going to be a little bit earlier, but yeah, Walker Kessler, who had a down season. You can look at Clint Capella again, Zubac again later on. There's heaps of names that will be there in those mid to late rounds. And again, like I said, you can generally find rebounds and blocks off the waiver wire a little bit easier than you can scoring and assists, because we know that they're the 2 most scarce categories in the game.
I'm grabbing the wheel on this boat for a moment, because you brought up a name that I hadn't talked about all that much on the pod until this most recent Friday, and that's Ivica Zubac, who I classify as a small winner during all of this. Do you like him a little more than usual coming into this season? Just, playing alongside more pick and roll than he has in recent seasons?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, what the Clippers haven't, apart from Paul George leaving, they haven't made any other massive deal or moves that I've missed, I don't think, Dan.
Not really. No, Derek Jones Jr. was kind of like the
Oh,
guy,
yes, of course.
and what Kevin Porter Jr. I'm sure we're all thrilled about that one.
Yeah.
So I figured more Harden with the basketball to start possessions. That's probably more screens coming from Zubats, and no Mason Plumlee anymore. I think they might have brought in Mo Bamba as the backup
Mo
now.
Bamba. Yeah,
So
he's their backup now. Um,
not too worried
and I
about him
mean,
jacking the
no, I
minutes.
don't have to worry about him too much. PJ Tucker doesn't play much. Nick Batum, potentially an increased role for Terrence Mann there. But yeah, you think of Ivica Zubac again, a guy that doesn't need sort of 30 to 35 minutes to put up big numbers. 25 to 30, plenty enough for him. Strong double guy, decent efficiency. The blocks are there as well. So yeah, I quite like that name.
Talking to my good buddy Matt Smith at S-Man Sports of Basketball Monster fame. Matt, hit me with another winner or loser, whichever direction you want to go.
I mean, again, not that it was necessarily part of the trade, but Alex Caruso just going from the Bulls to the Thunder in that Josh Giddey deal. The Thunder are so loaded, and Caruso will probably just now be a sort of a 3-and-D guy. Obviously, a massively important part of that roster and what they want to do in the playoffs. But I think he'll lose, some fantasy value, and probably at this stage not quite standard league relevant. And I guess the other one we're waiting to see what happens is with the Pelicans and DeJounte Murray.
Yeah.
Does Brandon Ingram get moved, before the season starts or during the season, or do they, re-sign him? If they do keep him and CJ McCollum, then yeah, I think that impacts DeJounte Murray a little bit as well. So again, still lots to play out. But Cam Thomas, I think a few of the other people you've had on the pod as well, Dan, really like his value going into the season in Brooklyn with Mikal Bridges no longer there and just going to take a ton of shots. Probably not great for his field goal percentage, but in terms of the scoring and the threes and potentially some more rebounds and assists, I think he was a nice winner as well. So yeah, plenty going on.
Let's go to the Pelicans for just a minute before I let you go. This is one that's been weirdly polarizing for the folks that have come on to talk free agency with me. My initial assessment, and I'm not trying to host a podcast where I'm going to be challenging everybody all the time. My initial assessment is that it's just a lot of offensive options now, and they've sort of removed not that Valanciunas was playing all that much by the end of the year, but they've sort of removed the one guy where you're like, all right, well, he can just, go collect some rebounds or whatever. And now they've got Zion. They still have Ingram. He's hadn't been traded yet. McCollum, DeJounte, who they just traded for. I love the abundance of riches there. But about half of the analysts that have come on have said they like what it means for DeJounte Murray, that they think it'll turn him back into more of a facilitator and less of the not Trae Young version of himself. And the other half has said, that's great, but right now he's competing to facilitate with McCollum, with Ingram, with Zion, with everybody else you pile on that mix. Which side of that ledger do you fall on?
I'm on the little bit of the side that he's declined in value or will decline in value. Again, just sharing the ball with CJ Ingram, Zion, as you mentioned, and then they've still got Trey Murphy and Herb Jones on the wing to take their three. So I think they've really tried to get DeJounte for his defense, and I know he hasn't been the strongest defensive player over the past couple of seasons, but I do expect him to make a real focus on that in this season, and whether that his steals can go to the 1.8 2 steals a game, and that boosts his value up. With the scoring coming down, the assists may be coming down, but the efficiency and the steals go up. Maybe it all sort of evens out a little bit and counteracts each other. But at this stage, the way it all sits with all those, I think it probably hurts his value a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you, if only because when you look at it, there was this, there a gut feeling else. That Trae Young took everything away from DeJounte Murray, but he actually took the most field goal attempts he's had in any season of his career last year at 18.8, which was even more. Now, admittedly, the assists were higher in that crazy year in San Antonio, but I don't see how going to a place where I know Trae Young has the ball all the time, but now he's going to a place with 3 guys who need the ball almost all the time.
Yeah.
So I tend to lean in your direction as well. And again, I'm not trying to start any fights on this thing. I like hearing all the different perspectives. I think I lean your way on that one where, yes, maybe the Steelers do go back up a bunch, but that feels fluky. I don't think that we can just say, oh, yeah, he doesn't have to do as much on offense. So, magically he's going to get 30 more steals this year. It might happen, but I don't think we can expect it. So I'm with you on that one. Do you think they move Brandon Ingram? Like, would you feel more bullish on the situation if we knew he was gone?
Probably, but again, it depends on what they get back, and I just don't know who's trading for Brandon Ingram at the moment. Is it the Warriors with all of their sort of pieces, but they seem to be in the Lauri Markkanen camp, and they've already got Kuminga there.
The Kings made their move already.
And then if you trade for him, then you've got to give him the big, massive contract extension and pay him a ton of money. It's I don't know. Did the Bulls just do a Zach LaVine for Brandon Ingram type of swap, but then it doesn't really make any difference from a win point of view? Yeah,
just to get a new face in the locker room. That's all you're doing at that point.
Yeah, it's like when, Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook's contract were untradeable and they just traded them for each other, basically. And it just, feels like just moving pieces for the sake of moving pieces. But I guess that's what NBA GMs do, and we do as fantasy players.
I think is the center on the Pels right now Daniel Tice?
Yep, it is.
Are you doing anything with that right now, or are you mostly just looking at that and going, well, they're not done here?
I mean, if they go into training camp like this, yeah, for sure, I'd probably expect Zion to play a little bit more center so they can get Herb Jones and Trey Murphy into the lineup. But again, for a deeper league option, and again, just you can add his name into those, rebounding bigs that I mentioned, earlier on, and another one for the deep leagues.
Third here, you just got him on your little 30 deep cheat sheet card off to the side. Is that what you're telling us?
Well, I am, and Jalen Johnson, Jalen Smith, but don't you go drafting him this year because I want him down. So
no, well, they might. The Bulls could move Vooch too.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're really
move him. That opens up a ton of minutes for Jalen Smith, and then then it definitely gets interesting.
As long as he's not going to get Rick Carlisle right out of another rollie. I mean, how many times? I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Matt, we're right up against the time limit. So before you go, what are you working on these days? Promo something.
So I've just started the other day doing my point guard tiers. That'll be over in Basketball Monster. I haven't heard of an opening date yet, but normally it's sort of the end of August, early September for all Basketball Monster members and fans. Working on all my positional tiers leading into draft season. And then we'll do, all sorts of other articles after that. But, right now it's just getting back into it, doing the tiers, doing the player comments. And we'll see what happens, over the coming weeks and months with Olympic basketball, more signings, summer leagues in full swing at the moment as well. So, it's all happening.
Yeah, our two teams played an exhibition game. I guess by the time this airs, it'll be yesterday. But that was kind of a fun one, USA and Australia, right? That was decent. It ended up competitive.
I haven't actually even seen the results. You have to tell me what happened or who played well.
I forget. I think Anthony Davis had a good game for US again. And then let's see. Jock Landale went big for you guys.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. But I'll leave it at that. You can check out the rest. Check out the rest on your own. It was fun. It was a fun ball game. Yes, though I love those player tiers, Matt. Everybody should be checking them on Twitter at @SMSports. That way you'll know when all this stuff is dropping. Matt, thank you so much for squeezing this in between kiddo naps.
Anytime. Appreciate you. Thanks, Dan.
And that's my buddy, the great Matt Smith, Basketball Monster fame, bringing you his free agency winners, his free agency losers. And I do so let's expand upon a couple of those things, because I thought Matt brought up a couple of names that we haven't really hit on a lot, and it's interesting that we haven't spent more time on Trae Young. And I also want to spend a little bit more time on the DeJounte Murray move, although we're not going to go too deep on that, because at some point here in the next week or two, we'll have a show where we cover the Pelicans. And my hope, it's a soft hope, is that they've made whatever other roster move they've got coming. It's probably not going to happen that fast, but, a man can dream anyway. So what does this mean for Trae Young, DeJounte being gone? On its surface, it's going to be more stuff. And if you go back to basically the last time that Trae Young was without DeJounte Murray, which is the 21-22 season, that was when we finally got back to an 82 gamer. Trae played 76 out of 82 games. He averaged 28.5 points, 9.7 assists, a steal, doesn't block any shots. And he went 46% from the field and 90 from the free throw line. And that was intriguing, because that was a number that seemed kind of unattainable for him prior to that year, and kind of feels a little bit unattainable for Trae again since that year. Every other season in Trae Young's career has been well below that. 41.8 his first year in the NBA, and it was a lot worse than that for the first 4 months. Remember, he shot like 39%. 43.7, 43.8, 46, 42.9, 43. He's been extraordinarily consistent outside of that one monster year. What was different that year for Trae Young? Two things, interestingly. His 2-point and 3-point field goal percent were both up from his career marks. It's going to, I think, make us all a little bit nauseated to hear this. Trae Young is only a 35.5% three-point shooter in his career, and he's taken like 8.5 of those a ball game. You got to be better than that. But that year, he shot 53.5% from two, when he's just a 50.5% two-point shooter throughout his career. So everything was up that season. So what I think we can probably look at with Trae Young, and again, a lot of this is, there's guesswork involved without question. First thing is, Trae, Matt, 100% right on the point that Trae Young is going to have to do more. With DeJounte Murray gone, the shots, the assists, all that stuff is just going to have to be higher. It kind of almost has no choice. Last 2 seasons, he's taken around 19 shots a game. The year before DeJounte showed up, he was at 20.5, basically. So I think we can expect Trae Young to get back over 20 shots a ball game. Might not be way over. I think people are like, oh, he'll take 22 a game. It's hard to get to that many when you're also the prime distribution guy on the club. But 20.5 feels pretty reasonable, which at his current clip, call it 43% instead of 46. You add another shot and a half, something to that mix. It's not quite a 10% jump, but a little bit less than that. Probably about 2-ish points per game. That goes up. Hopefully the free throw number comes back up, but again, it'll come down to how the NBA is being refereed this coming season. He's always been a monster assist guy, so I don't think you can assume that that's going to shift in any meaningful way. But what does it do to his overall value? 9-cat, 8-cat, obviously pretty different there, because the turnovers are going to be exceptionally high regardless. He'll be around 4, possibly higher than that, where he was this last season. This year, Trae Young was number 35 in 9-cat on the numbers that we've just talked about. Certainly better than that in 8-cat. He jumps up to number 14 in 8 category leagues. An extra 5 to 7% of stuff, if that's all we want to give him on this DeJounte Murray news, does likely, at least in 8-cat, bounce him up to the back end of the first round. 9-cat, it bounces him up from, what did we just say, 35, probably 5-6 slots. So probably in my eyes remains a third rounder, or again, head-to-head leaguers, you're probably semi-punting turnovers if you're not all the way doing it, or semi-punting field goal percent or something like that. So he probably does push up into the second round or even first round, depending on what categories you're eliminating for him. But it's also, I think, reasonable to assume that the steals come back down. 1.3 was far and away his career best. His 36 minutes a game this season was actually a career high for Trae Young. And I don't think that it's all that surprising that he only played in 54 out of 82 games in the year where his minutes were the highest they'd ever been. Overall, he's generally a pretty durable dude. Doesn't miss a ton of ball games. Prior to this year, he'd mostly been somewhere between around 7 to 12 missed per season, which is fine. He only missed one his first year, and then it was 12, 9, 6, 9, and 28. So 28 is certainly your outlier there. Where would I draft Trae Young in head-to-head? I mean, I really have no problem drafting him in the second round in head-to-head leagues. And I think he'll probably end up going early second round in most formats. Roto, you got to be a little bit more careful because there's almost no way that if you're not punting anything, that he gets to where you're drafting him in 9 category leagues. Again, if you're punting field goal or turnover, or whatever, then that changes things a little bit. But if you're trying to attack all 9 categories and he's getting drafted at 14, there's kind of no way his per game mark gets there unless he shoots 46% again, which feels very much like the anomalous season out of his 6 so far. So that I thought was kind of an interesting little footnote. The other footnote I wanted to expand upon a little bit was the DeJounte Murray stuff, because again, and I actually am inclined to agree with Matt on this one. As things are currently constructed, DeJounte was number 39 in Atlanta last year, 22.5 points per game, a little over 5 boards, 6.5 assists, 1.7 combined defensive stats, 2.5 3-pointers, 46 and 79 were the splits on Murray. And that was alongside one extraordinarily high usage guy. But no matter the usage that Trae Young soaked up last year, it wasn't as high as the combined usage of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson. And that's kind of what you're running into now. Because I mean, Jalen Johnson was amazing this last year, but he only took 12.5 shots a game. He was the number 3. CJ McCollum goes from being the number 2 option to being we don't really know. Zion's number 1. If Ingram's there, DeJounte's going to have a tough time dethroning him as another guy who takes lots of shots, because Ingram took 16 this past season. Where did McCollum finish? He took 16 also. And DeJounte was at 19. Trae Young, what did we just say? 18 and change? I mean, Zion basically knocks that out by himself. Now, I get it. Trae Young had the ball in his hands, all the assists, all that other stuff. That's a higher usage rate than Zion, who, by the way, was actually around 16 also. But we're talking about going into a place where there's just too many guys. There's too many. I don't care how efficient DeJounte Murray might somehow become overnight. There's just too many guys there. He's not going to get to 19 shots. He's not going to get the time on ball that we're all kind of hoping he would, unless they clear out a piece. The removal of Brandon Ingram without a usage guy coming back would definitely ease a lot of that burden. And now suddenly you can be like, okay, DeJounte, you can get to your 16 shots. You can be more of a facilitator on this team. But like 22.5 points for Murray feels completely unattainable right now. And so the only way that he doesn't see a drop-off is if the steals jump from 1.4 back up to 2. And I don't think that we can guarantee or even expect that will happen, to just be like, oh, well, he'll have to do more elsewhere to make it up. I think we have to just go with Occam's razor. The simplest solution is often the correct one. And the simplest solution here is Murray's going to a team where there's just, for the moment, like Matt was saying with an asterisk, for the moment, there's less to do. Right now, there's less to do. And less to do is less fantasy value. We can want it to be another way as much as humanly possible. But 19 times out of 20, less stuff is less value. A couple of quick notes from our live chat. Some of them funny, some of them relevant. We'll hit them all here. Dem Bird says, LOL, DeJounte's your main point of attack defender, and Zion's your center protecting the paint. Pelicans going to give up 160 a game. Well, yeah, but, for fantasy, that's good. We'd love it. It'd be great if every Pels game was like 150 to 145. Matt notes, Murray took 44 shots in a game last season. I think that was the one where Trey was out, right? He hit the game winner. Bad efficiency, but Murray should get less shots. Yeah, simple as that. There's just not going to be a game this year where he can find 44 freaking shots out there. So, dude took 19 shots a game last season. It wasn't like he was just spotting up in the corner. Every minute that Trae Young wasn't on the floor, DeJounte was like, mine, gimme. And he went nuts with those minutes. So there's just no way he gets back to the usage of San Antonio. That's not what's happening here. In fact, if anything, he does less. And then if you're drafting him, you're praying for lower turnovers, higher steals to cover up whatever the drop-off might be. So Murray, he's got terrific fantasy potential. We saw that when a first-round year out of the Spurs. But to say, he's going to move up from, early fourth to late third or something like that, I think fourth round still makes sense for him. All right, we'll go a little bit shorter today. We've had these 50 some odd minute pods the last couple of days with the, 2 teams at a time stuff. We'll put a pin in this one. Asada Taco says, isn't higher steals and better field goal percent on a better team a myth? Yeah, basically. Yes, well said. It happens infrequently, but there's no strong correlation there. 100% correct question there, Asada Taco. Every once in a while, you get a player that slides into a better role and their shot profile changes or whatever. But assuming that steals are just going to magically go up, we can't assume that. We saw with Josh Richardson, as soon as there was one season where he was a usage guy, steals and blocks never came back. And that's not to say that Murray won't have more steals, but it's not going to be because he's on a different team. It would just be because of the natural kind of ebb and flow of a player's NBA career arc. Because he was at 1.7, and then he had a 1.5 in San Antonio, and then it went up to 2, then it went down to 1.5, and then 1.4 this last year. It bounces around. It has a little bit to do with the kind of defense a team plays, if everybody's just gambling on every play. So there is a little bit of that comes in, but it's not like, oh, you put him on a team with better players and the steals magically get better. Sometimes you put a guy on a team with better players and the steals go down because of defensive principles. Think about the Knicks as an example of that. They just stay in front of their guy, and so guys are not piling up steals in New York because not everybody's got to gamble all the time. It works in much more unique and nuanced ways than just better team steal go up. Sometimes field goal percent does go up when you put a guy around teammates that just get him open all the time. But he was with a better distributor in Atlanta than anybody that DeJounte's with in New Orleans. So I don't think we can expect that'll happen. And on top of everything else, DeJounte Murray has shot almost exactly 46% every year for the last 6 seasons in a row. To assume that that's just going to change, I think is also probably a little bit naive. So correct. I don't know if I'd go so far as to just say that better field goal percent on a better team is a myth, because it's more of individual situations. Sometimes it'll happen for a guy, but a lot of times it doesn't. But to just assume that it will is incorrect. So good point. And that's why, again, I think the simplest solution here is just to say he's going to do less, so there's probably going to be less value. Play the odds. Thanks again to Matt Smith, Basketball Monsters Matt Smith, S-Man Sports on the socials. And thank you to Matt Smith for squeezing in a chat. Well, he was DMing me on Twitter. He's like, I'm trying to get my son to take a nap. And I'm looking at my watch going, yeah, my kid's bedtime is 25 minutes. So we're going to get this thing in somehow. And then zoop, slipped it in there. Tomorrow, what am I forgetting? I can't remember. I'll give you the old Bob Uecker from Major League. The hell with it. I think tomorrow we're doing another twofer on teams, but I'm also now thinking I'm forgetting about a potential guest on the show. screwing this up. We're going to talk to Red Bauer at some point in the next week, but I'm pretty sure that's not tomorrow. So stay tuned. I don't know. I got my head in my you-know-what. It's Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Make sure to like, subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, to drop a 5-star review either on Spotify or on Apple. That really does go a long way, as we really are finally starting to see a little bit of traction as people have figured out, oh, that's where Dan went. So whatever you guys can do to continue to push that ball forward, I really do appreciate it. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. I'm off to go take my kids to swim lessons or some nonsense. See you later.